be talking about plant hormones. I know you're excited. Let me tell you or explain where we left off yesterday. We talked about, we introed plant hormones. We talked about one plant hormone, auxin. And I wanted to start with auxin and end with auxin yesterday because it's the master hormone for the plant. You're going to see auxin in pretty much every application. It's going to come up on the test quite a bit. It was in your lab-ish. I don't think we did the part, never mind, on hormones. Never mind. Anyways, we talked about yesterday that auxin was produced in the apical shoot tips. Okay? And that since it was produced at the top of the shoots and the stem and the leaves, it had to travel down. It is the master hormone for the plant. We will talk about the way that it manipulates the plant. Like when plants move, it's because of auxin. So like for example, if a plant is growing straight and an insect attacks this side, auxin will flow to this side of the plant and make these cells longer. It'll cause these cells to shrivel so the plant will bend this way to get away from that attacker. So auxin causes that plant to move. Now, does it happen really fast? No, we know that. But auxin is the hormone that takes care of doing that. Effects of auxin. In this slide, we mentioned yesterday that each of the hormones doesn't have just one impact. It could do a few things. The very first one, it says it establishes apical and basal polarity. And that might mean nothing to you. But if you take a seed and just put it in the ground, the seed already knows which side of it is going to be the top of the plant and which side is going to be the bottom. And that is established by auxin. So the apical and basal polarity, apical means the top, basal means the bottom. So if you put the seed in there upside down and backwards, that seed will rotate itself around so that it grows the way that it's supposed to grow. So when a seed has apical and basal polarity, that means it knows which part is the top, which part is the bottom. It induces the differentiation of vascular tissue. You already know we have vascular tissue in plants, and what are the two types? Xylem and phloem. Yes. It mediates phototropism. Tropism is a plant's response. Phototropism is a plant's response to light. So as a plant sees light, what does it do? I said sees light, but like as it senses light, it goes towards it. Right. It promotes the formation of adventitious roots. These are roots that show up to allow for an increase of absorption, increased surface area and absorption. Maybe in areas where there's drought or that a plant can't access the resources from the soil, it'll kind of grow out above ground in the event that that needs to occur. It stimulates the development of fruit. I don't want to add leaves here, but you'll see each hormone either promotes fruit development, fruit and leaf development, or it promotes sustenance. And sustenance is when it falls off. So leaves and fruits and flowers will fall off, and we'll talk about that. So auxin is responsible for the development. We also use auxin for cloning plant tissues for research purposes. Or if you own like a vineyard and you have a vine that's doing really well and producing a whole lot of really nice, whatever fruit it is that you're trying to grow, it could be peaches and grapes, whatever, you clone that plant by adding auxin. Auxin is the growth hormone for that plant, so it would stimulate the growth of those plants. How else could we use auxin? We use it not just like for the fruits, but for our own application. Any seedless fruits that you get, like a seedless watermelon, is because auxin was inhibited. So it didn't allow for the development of those seeds. It only allowed for the development of the fruit. So you got that seedless fruit. We do that over and over again. I don't like the fact that it says it's hard. So I'm going to say it impedes or inhibits premature fruit drop. What that means is fruits and vegetables are supposed to grow until they become perfectly ripe. Two ways for them to be ripe. The plant either says they're done growing, or the fruit or vegetable gets so heavy it actually falls. What auxin does is it says we're still growing, we're still working, and so it holds on to that fruit longer. So that's what it means here. Okay, and you'll see other hormones that do the opposite. It allows for root development on stem cuttings. So again, if we have a farm or vineyard, or garden, whatever, and we clip a stem, we can add auxin to the tip of it, and it will stimulate the development of roots so that we can start growing a whole new plant somewhere else without starting with the seed. And it mentions that if you pinch auxin at the very top of a plant, it'll inhibit it growing up and cause it to grow out. That's only for decorative purposes. Like, we don't just say, hey, let's go torture this plant and do this. We don't do that. These are for people who manipulate their gardens or landscape designers and such. Okay, there's no other hormone that we go into that much detail for. Cytokinins. Cytokinins, if you were with me in anatomy, or you've studied anatomy, we talked about cytokinins in humans. Plants also have them, but cytokinins ultimately allow for cytokinesis, or increase the rate of cytokinesis. Do you remember what cytokinesis is? Growth. It happens during what process? Mitosis. So cell division ends with cytokinesis. So cytokinins stimulate cytokinesis. So what do you think this hormone is going to help this plant do? Grow. It mentions that the root tips are a major production site. It's also produced in shoots and seeds, which makes sense. But here's this. Cytokinins influence meristem size. So the amount of meristem that's in that plant, stem cell activity, well, meristem size, which would continue with meristem. So remember, stem cells are meristem. And vascular tissue development. You saw the exact same thing with auxin. So there was some overlap there. I intentionally bolded this so that you could see, hey, these are the big deals. This is also the first introduction of where it says leaf sustenance. Leaf sustenance means the leaf is falling. If cytokinins tell the plant to grow, what are they saying, or what is a cytokinin doing when a leaf falls? Is it functioning, or is it not? Probably not. At that point, the plant has said, we are done growing for this season. So leaf sustenance means that that plant is aging, or it's got through that season, so the leaves will begin to fall off. And I mentioned this to a student who was very confused last period, so let me just say this. Plants measure the amount of darkness. When there's not enough light, they can't carry out photosynthesis in high rates. So less photosynthesis means less food for that plant. So the first things to go are going to be the fruits and the leaves, because the plant has to keep its stem, its core, alive. So when you see fruits dropping, it's literally because the plant has said, you're too much to take care of. I need to focus on me, and it gets rid of that. So when growing seasons are at their prime, photosynthetic levels are super high, everything's taken care of. But as those growing seasons come to an end, you'll see it dropping the fruit, dropping the leaves, because the plant can no longer carry out photosynthesis in the high enough amounts to support everything. So if it can't support it, it gets rid of it. And that's what we end up calling sustenance, is when it's getting rid of it. Next hormone, gibberellins. Gibberellins, also called gibberellic acid, produced in apical buds, roots, young leaves, and seed embryos. What can you tell me about all these tissues right here? Apical, young, and embryos. What kind of theme do we have going there? Apical, roots, well, apical on both buds and roots, young leaves, and seed embryos. Are these all really old? So what do young things need to do? Grow. Fosters seed germination. What is germinating again? Growing. It enhances the stem elongation, tells it to flower, impedes leaf and fruit aging. So it says, hey, everything's fine, we're good, we're going to keep growing. So the first three hormones that we've covered so far, auxin, gibberellins, and cytokinins, really promote growth. Okay? Oh yeah, well that's the same. It's the same as going off of gibberellin, or cytokinins. This was a study. It was not in your book, so it isn't in ethylene. Now we're going to do the exact opposite. So those three kind of promoted growth. these are going to start to slow it, inhibit it. These are also called stress hormones. Ethylene, the very first bullet tells you that it's super important for developmental stress. So developmental tells you that this is when the plant is doing what? Growing. It is stressful for a plant to grow. Well, that sounds really crazy. But it is. For a seed in the dirt, I'll come back to this slide. For a seed in the dirt, it's protected by the dirt down here. But then when conditions are favorable and it decides it's time to germinate, it starts to send out its little roots. This organism, in order to come out of the dirt, has to be able to support its own weight. This organism has never had to support weight on its own. There's no parent there saying, sweetheart, hold your hand, let's get through this. It literally has to go through everything all by itself. Here's our little baby embryo. Here's our protective seed coat. The seed will push this out first to protect the baby. Then when this comes out, it'll sense the environment and it'll say, okay, I think everything's here good, conditions are favorable. It still doesn't let the baby out. It shoots the stem up first so that the stem can then sample the environment. What? This is too much thought for a plant, in my opinion. It's just crazy to think that. Then once the stem says it's okay, it will grow enough strength to lift that plant up so that it can grow. Ethylene levels in this age of a plant are really high because this is a very stressful time for a plant. It has no parents, it has no friends. It's trying to grow on its own. Okay? So coming through the ground for a seed is a super stressful situation. It mentions here, so it says this response protects the delicate meristem from the crusty soil. Like, the plant thinks of that soil as a threat. Now I went back a slide. So it mentions that ethylene is produced during seedling growth, flower development, and fruit ripening. When we have a produce section in a grocery store, does the produce get picked off its tree, vine, garden, wherever it's coming from, when it's ripe? When do they pick that, they harvest that food from those farms? Way, way before it's ripe. Okay? Very bad for the fruit, actually, which is what we're going to get into. So they harvest it when it's not ready. They pack it, they ship it, sometimes 4, sometimes 8 days away, depending on where its destination is. Then it still gets delivered, and it's still not ripe. So do you know what most grocery stores do? They spray it with ethylene, and 8 hours later, it's ripe. So it speeds up that ripening process. When they talk about organic versus inorganic, organic foods are sprayed with a version that will start up ripening that comes from carbon-based, versus inorganic, which would not be carbon-based. So all the treatments that these fruits and vegetables receive, if they're organic, they have to be carbon-based. If they're inorganic, they're not technically inorganic, they're just not labeled organic, because anything that has carbon is organic. Okay, it mentions it has roles in leaf and petal aging and drop. So it says the plant, it's done. It's gone through its growth season. We're done with our reproductive role. We can drop at this point. It allows for defense against any type of attack. It mentions osmotic stress. What would cause osmotic stress? Water, either too much or not enough, right. Influences cell expansion, and that's with auxin. We'll get to that with movements. And it allows for cells to expand in all directions. And that'll be in plant movements. I'll come back to that. So the first stress hormone is ethylene. The second 2 stress hormones are not stress from development. These allow the plant to deal with stress from the environment. Stress from the environment would be too much sun, too hot, too cold, salt, it's too salty. What other things could cause stress to a plant in the environment? There's too much rain, there's not enough rain. These are all stressful environmental factors. Oh, and of course attacked by something. So the two environmental stress hormones are abscisic acid and steroids. Abscisic acid first. Very first thing it says is it slows or stops a plant metabolism. Why do we want to slow or stop a plant's metabolism? You already know the answer to this. Why do we want to tell a plant, just stop right now? Because what? It will grow forever. The conditions aren't favorable. It will grow forever. But remember, you can't go wrong when we talk about favorable or unfavorable conditions. It is stressful when the conditions aren't favorable, so what does the plant do? It'll go into a dormant phase. It'll say, hey, we're just going to shut down for a short time until conditions are favorable. Yes. Okay. It also mentions here, it'll stimulate the formation of protective scales, like when that plant goes into its off-season, fall or winter.
Kind of like a grass ground.
Yes. All of this is hormonally regulated. But yes, whatever it does for its dormant phase is regulated with abscisic acid. Steroids. Steroids are hormones that stimulate the development of xylem. What's xylem used for again? Carrying water. So why would I want more xylem? Either to accommodate more water, or there's not enough water, so when it does rain, the plant can hold more. We do this to our crops in Texas. We apply this hormone to our large crops, especially during droughts, or if a drought has been forecasted, so that we can prepare our plants to deal with the lack of water for that growing season. Okay? So it mentions that we can apply this to crops to help protect them from the heat. It helps their vacuoles take in more water. Impedes leaf drop, stimulates xylem development. So we want more water in these plants. Steroids. Okay, that is all hormones. Now let's talk about how a plant responds to light. And this is where we'll stop today. So we already know the plant moves to light, okay, so that it can carry out photosynthesis. We already know all that. How does the plant know about light? Well, it has photoreceptors, so it has to be able to receive that stimuli first. Then it integrates it and decides how to respond. This results in the sun tracking we've already discussed, but I want to talk about photoperiodism in plants. So the word up there says phytochrome. Just looking at the word phytochrome. What does phyto tell you? In chrome? Color. This is a colored pigment in a plant. There are two phytochromes. Phytochrome far red and phytochrome red. Okay, so far red and red. Let me tell you the difference between far red and red. Red is red. Far red is maroon. Do you remember in our photosynthesis experiment what were the two colors that plants grew really well in? Red and blue. Red and blue. Red and blue. So what do you think happened in maroon? If we had, I mean there wasn't a maroon, but if you had to think. It would grow-ish, but it was on its way down to not growing. So, here is a gene, and there is no red light, okay? So it's receiving far red or maroon light, so it is shutting off. When I apply red light to that gene, guess what it does? It activates it. It clearly, I just said, Logan, it would be awesome if you would just listen for just a second, like not trying to. So far red, the maroon light will turn it off. The red light will turn it on. The red light will turn it, or the maroon light will turn it off. So far red turns it off. Red light turns it on. Let me show you this in an experimental setting, and then I'm going to come back. Oops. If we have seedlings and we only leave them in dark, they don't grow. If we have seedlings and we expose them to red light, look what they do. They grow. We have these seedlings, we put in red light, and then we have maroon light. What does it do? It grew a little bit for red, but we shut it off there. Here we did red, far red, and then red again. What did the seedling do? When we ended on far red, what did it do? It didn't grow. It didn't grow. Slightly, but not nearly what they did there. When plants are in red light, you already know they're going to grow. Far red is it turning itself off. Okay? So I'm going to do this real quick because I'm about to show you something that might be confusing. So phytochrome far red versus phytochrome red. Phytochrome far red. Let me go back to this drawing so you can see where individuals get confused. Phytochrome far red is turned on by red light. Phytochrome far red is turned on by red light. And when there's red light, there is growth. Phytochrome red is turned on by far red light. And if phytochrome red is on, there is no growth. And I wanted to show you the growth patterns before I explain this because it is extremely confusing. So watch. Right now, this is phytochrome red. Phytochrome red results in no growth. What turned phytochrome red on? Far red light. Here I have phytochrome far red, and the plant is growing. What turned the far red on? Red light. To me, that's a confusing mix, which is why I wrote it out like this. So here is the phytochrome. Here is what turns it on. And here's what it does. Okay, so phytochrome far red will allow for growth. It's turned on by red light. Red, phytochrome red, will no growth, and it's turned on by far red light. To me, that's confusing.
How does the red turn on the flag?
So the red wavelength will stimulate that protein to be produced. Proteins produce, phytochromes release, and it can carry out whatever it is, whatever process it's carrying out. Okay. So this leads us to photoperiodism. So we have our phytochromes. Plants do not measure daylight. Plants measure the length of darkness. So, plants measure the length of darkness, they do not measure daylight. So long day plants will only become active when night is what? Short. Short day plants will only become active when night is long. They don't measure day, they only measure night. Day neutral plants will bloom whether the night is short or long. Yes, sir.
Is that kind of telling the season?
That is exactly what's happening, is it's measuring the season. Yes. Okay, so again, plants do not measure the amount of light, they measure the length of nighttime, darkness. Okay? They do not measure light. So this explains what I just said in words. I want to show you the picture. I'll come back to this. Here, I have two flowers. I have an iris and a goldenrod. The iris is a long day plant. The goldenrod is a short day plant. So here, I have where the night is shorter than the day. So the day is longer, the night is short. The plant only measures the darkness. Because it's a short night, the long day plant will bloom, but the short day plant does not, because the conditions are not favorable for it. here, we have a much longer period of darkness, so the long day plants do not bloom, but the short day plants do. So they did an experiment. They said, wonder what would happen if we put both these plants in a situation where we have a long period of darkness, but in the middle we're going to turn the light for a short time. This could simulate like storms, repetitive storms. It could do a lot of things if you were living in Alaska, the fact that the sun doesn't go down sometimes, all of it. Anyway, remember, plants don't measure light, they measure the length of dark. So here I had dark, then I had light, then I had dark. So does this plant read it as a long night or a short night? It's a short night. So if it's a short night, it's a long day, and only our long day plants are going to bloom. Our short day plants do not. So plants are literally responding to the conditions in their environment. Let me go back to this so you can see again. Long day plants will only bloom when the night is long, or the night is short, so the day is long. Short day, night is long, day is short, and day neutral, it doesn't matter. What do you think a plant does when it's in shade? You're a plant, you know what you need to survive. I put you in a shady situation. I meant not like a bad situation, yeah. You guys and all your cool words. I'll never be cool. Shading response, and you're exactly right, Natalie. She said the plant's going to try to reach the sunlight. So it mentions here that whenever a plant is shaded, it will try to extend its leaves out. Why its leaves? That's what's capturing the sunlight. So it will bend its stem to extend its leaves to try to reach that sunlight. The problem becomes if, like, when you talk about the rainforest where they have this really big canopy, we don't have a lot of smaller plants at the bottom. Why? There's no sunlight. And if there are small plants at the bottom, they're ones that don't rely on large amounts of sunlight. And because of that canopy, you don't usually see that. You'll see that even here in this area. If you have a tree that's been there for a very long time, the grass underneath it is very scarce unless you have sod brought in or you've planted or fertilized grass. Most trees, big, large trees that have been here for a long time have mostly dirt beneath them because they've shaded and kept the sun from as a resource to those plants that are underneath them. Okay, and tomorrow we will do gravity and tropisms. That'll finish this section, and then we'll move on